Hey guys, tonight we slip through a curtain of spice-laced air into a world where pomegranate seeds are more dangerous than daggers, where a bite of lamb could lead to a love affair or a very public execution, and where nothing is ever just food. You step barefoot into a moonlit courtyard, the tiles warm from the day's sun, still holding the whispers of 1,000 feasts. Jasmine clings to your clothes like a rumor. You can smell it, cardamom, rosewater, something fermented and forbidden, and somewhere in the distance someone is laughing too softly, too slowly. You're not sure if it's a welcome or a warning. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are in Persia, not the sanitized Persia of postcards and predictable domes, but the sticky, fragrant, half-drunk Persia that breathes like a lover asleep in your bed. It is the 11th century, and you're disoriented in the best possible way. You've arrived just after dusk in the southern quarter of Rai, which is now absorbed by Tehran's vast sprawl, but once was the glittering throat of trade routes pulsing with desire. The wind carries roasted pistachio skins, horse sweat, the faint decay of overly ripe fruit, and something else. Smoke? No. Incense. Oud, resinous and syrupy, trailing from a silk-draped window above. You look up. A silhouette retreats from the lattice. Behind you, a boy no older than 12 offers dates. He doesn't speak, just stares, daring you to take one. You hesitate. Do you remember the tale of the traveler who accepted a date in silence and woke up as a royal concubine in Mashhad? No? The date tastes like honey and betrayal. You keep walking, your sandals kicking up dust that smells faintly of ash and saffron. A man, dressed in a deep green robe, brushes past you carrying a basket covered in cloth. A drop of dark red sauce trails behind him. Tomato? Blood? Historians still argue whether certain ceremonial dishes in the court of the Seljuks were symbolic or literal. That's the thing about Persian food. Layers of meaning as thick as the stews themselves. One scholar swears a recipe for liver jam in a 12th century manuscript is actually code for a politically sanctioned assassination via meal. Another insists it's just, well, liver jam. The market unfolds like a fever dream. On one side, a line of dancers wrapped in gold thread are taking a break under a fig tree, licking saffron ice off their fingers while a man sings verses from Saadi. Verses that, depending on the tone, could either be poetry or foreplay. You can't tell which this is. Someone hands you a slice of melon. It's warm, too warm, and the sweetness coats your teeth like velvet. A girl nearby is laughing into her sleeve, but her eyes are fixed on you. You duck into a side alley where a different rhythm hums. A metalworker taps out a pattern that mimics the beats of an old folk song about a prince who loved his taster more than his wife. The taster, as the story goes, died choking on an apricot pit intended for the prince. There's a shrine to him now. People leave jars of pickled plums and tiny candied roses in his honor. A teenage boy once got caught stealing from the shrine, and legend has it his tongue turned green for a week. That part, no one debates. You enter a tented area lined with cushions, so plush you feel like your knees have been seduced. Women sit in clusters around small fire bowls, roasting nuts and murmuring predictions. One turns over a handful of fennel seeds and smiles. "You will eat something tonight that changes your destiny," she says. Then she bites into a candied violet and refuses to say more. But here's the real secret. In medieval Persia, food was never just food. It was message, metaphor, manipulation. Every dish told a story, and every story could end in bed, or in blood. The richer the dish, the riskier the moment. Honey-dripped lamb chops served under a tent, you might be proposing marriage. A salad of mint, radish, and yogurt? That's a cold shoulder. Pistachios soaked in rose water? Definitely flirting. Rice dyed 3 colors with saffron, barberry, and turmeric? Congratulations, you're now involved in a theological argument about divine unity. Of course, this wasn't only about elite intrigue. Street vendors had their codes, too. A baker might lace his bread with anise to imply you were welcome in his shop, or his bedroom. A candy maker in Shiraz once spent 6 years perfecting a marzipan rose so lifelike it fooled a visiting caliph, who bit into it, broke a tooth, and banned almonds for 3 months in a 10-mile radius. And then there's the sex. The kitchens of medieval Persia weren't just spaces for stews and skewers, they were theaters of desire. A young cook might slip an extra fig onto a concubine's plate to start a scandal. A court lady could stage a seduction using only a pomegranate, a silver spoon, and a silk napkin. One nobleman reportedly had a personal chef who knew his mood so well, he once served a lemon-stuffed duck at the exact moment his master considered ending an affair, and the tangy bitterness changed his mind. You pause at a stall selling dried mulberries and look down. A cat, coated in ash, is staring at you. The vendor chuckles. Don't feed him. He belongs to the mosque and he's been fasting for Ramadan since 1043. You nod solemnly. You're not sure if he's joking. You're not sure of anything anymore. Because by now, your senses are full. Your mouth tingles from a hint of cinnamon in the air. Your skin buzzes from the warmth. Your mind reels from the coded glances and quiet provocations. Someone slides a small clay cup into your hand. You sip. It's thick, like melted almonds and saffron and nightfall. A young man leans in close and whispers, "That drink was made for Shah Khusraw's 3rd wife. She drank it before every bath, said it made her irresistible. She died in her tub. Heart attack, or jealousy, or too much nutmeg. No one really knows. And that's the spell of this place. This kingdom of flavors and whispers. Nothing is clear. Every bite, every breath, every step feels like a test, a tease, a trap. And you're right where the story wants you. You drift toward a marble archway veiled with vines, where rose petals carpet the ground like some obsessive lover's apology. The scent here is sharper, almost sour, citrus and sweat, maybe a hint of vinegar from some forgotten marinade. A hand beckons you through, elegant and perfumed, disappearing before your eyes can follow it to a face. You enter a private garden nestled behind tall walls that seem too smooth to climb and too silent to trust. This is not a public place. This is a peacock pavilion, the kind of hidden estate where silk rustles louder than politics, and pleasure is portioned like dessert, deliberately, and always with layered meaning. You blink, and suddenly you are surrounded by color. Not just flowers and fabrics, but fruit. Heaps and bowls and pyramids of fruit. Pears glisten like they've been oiled with longing. Figs sit open-mouthed, juicy and too suggestive for polite company. Dates are piled like promises, and pomegranates split open as though mid-confession. In the middle of this edible jungle lies a long, low table draped in cloth of gold and set with silver plates, each one bearing a different course. The feast is not ready to be eaten. It is ready to be watched. No one is eating. Yet. A woman reclines on silk cushions, twirling a skewer of roasted lamb glazed in honey and vinegar. She's not hungry. She's circling something. Her eyes fall on you like shade in desert heat. A man across from her watches too, chewing slowly on a piece of melon, letting its juice trail down his wrist like an accident that hopes to be noticed. Welcome to a noble's dinner party in medieval Persia, where the first course is almost always foreplay, and your utensils might include your reputation. Historians still argue whether these private feasts functioned more as banquets or as elaborate auditions for intimacy. What's certain is that the food itself was choreographed. A roasted eggplant cut in half just so, meant to evoke parted lips or something more suggestive. Boiled eggs delicately split and seasoned with mint, strategically placed beside piles of smoked fish, textures colliding like the start of something you won't be able to stop. There are rumors that the Shah's favorite mistress used to trace Persian poems in yogurt on warm bread and feed it to visiting dignitaries. One diplomat reportedly proposed marriage after decoding a particularly raunchy couplet halfway through a lunch of lentil stew. And then there's the seating. You don't choose your spot. It's chosen for you with surgical precision. Sit too close to someone's wine bowl and you might be accused of seduction. Sit too far from the platter of roasted almonds and you're snubbing the host's fertility, apparently. It's like musical chairs, except the music is subtle side eyes and the stakes are public shame. Or worse, a night in the wrong person's bed, assuming you survive the almond paste. A young servant passes by, brushing rose water onto your hands with a feather-soft cloth. Her bracelets jingle like wind chimes. She leans in, whispers, "Don't eat the quince. He gave it to her. She died last week." You glance down. There's a bowl of quinces the color of bruises. No one is touching them. Behind the table, a small group of musicians plays something slow, slinking along the spines of the guests like a memory you're trying not to recall. A woman with a voice like steeped wine sings about a king who fell in love with a baker's son. The king invited the boy to a private feast, offered him candied walnuts, and asked him to choose a plate. One was silver, one was gold, one was clay. The boy chose the clay and was promoted instantly to royal lover, or exiled, or both. The stories never agree. A dish of saffron chicken arrives next to you, still steaming. The scent is overwhelming, sun and silk and the quiet moan of someone remembering a kiss. The man to your left offers you a bite from his spoon. His eyes are kind, but he's sweating too much. You hesitate. There's an old superstition that accepting food from a stranger links your fates for a full lunar cycle. Then again, you're here, aren't you? You take the bite. The flavor floods your tongue like a revelation. Warm, golden, slightly bitter at the end, like nostalgia or an almost apology. Somewhere behind the jasmine trellis, laughter erupts, high, breathy, deliberate. A silk curtain flutters, and you glimpse a woman dancing alone. She's barefoot, stepping lightly between trays of sweets as though auditioning for someone she cannot see. Her hips move like honey sliding off a warm spoon. You try not to stare. You fail. The host appears finally. He's not what you expect. Older, yes, but bright-eyed, with fingers stained from spices. He smells like turmeric and secrets. He claps his hands and a new dish arrives. Lamb stuffed with rice, apricots, pistachios, and something darker. He tells the story before anyone can ask. My grandfather's cook used to prepare this when a marriage proposal arrived. If the bride wept after tasting it, the marriage was doomed. If she asked for seconds, it was blessed. He pauses. My first wife refused to eat it. My second asked for thirds. My third choked on a pistachio. He smiles too widely. You pretend to smile back. And here comes tonight's sex story. At a similar feast in Shiraz around the late 12th century, a visiting poet named Dara reportedly seduced the host's son using only a platter of roasted plums and 3 verses of poetry. The son was married, naturally, to a woman who retaliated by seducing Dara's scribe. The whole affair turned into a literary scandal so spicy that 2 copies of the poem were banned from every library between Samarkand and Qazvin. But of course, the 3rd copy survived. It's hidden, they say, behind a false panel in an old madrasa, protected by the last surviving line of that poem. To taste a plum is to risk the tree. You lean back against the cushion, overwhelmed and vaguely aroused by a pastry you haven't even touched yet. The music slows. The guests begin to murmur about moving indoors, where the second part of the feast takes place, among candlelight and cushions and decisions people will pretend not to remember tomorrow. And you haven't even had dessert. You follow the procession indoors, through arched doorways carved with verses too intimate for public mosques, past pillars that smell faintly of incense and fermented rose petals. The air thickens as you enter the main chamber, low ceilings draped in velvet, flickering oil lamps sending shadows crawling across tiled floors. This is the private dining room of a Persian noble, but it's less a room and more a theater. The carpets are so soft they muffle your steps like a velvet threat. Bowls of fruit and wine rest on small stands beside every cushion, and the walls shimmer with tiny mirrors that catch candlelight like winks from another world. The whole space smells like roasted almonds, musk, and a danger you can't quite name. You sit, not where you choose, but where you are guided, gently but firmly, by a servant with kohl-ringed eyes and a knowing smile. This is where protocol becomes seduction. You're not just a guest now. You're a variable in a tightly controlled experiment of etiquette, power, and appetite. And here, etiquette is everything. In medieval Persian courts, the way you held your spoon could reveal your intentions. A slow stir? You're thoughtful. A quick clink against the bowl. You're impatient, possibly treasonous. Raising your bowl to drink rather than using a spoon? You may as well declare a coup. But the subtleties ran deeper. You place your napkin in your lap and immediately notice the man to your left doing the same. Only his napkin is folded into the shape of a tulip. An innocent flourish? Or a coded reference to his family's role in the last rebellion? You don't ask. A dish arrives. Yogurt with cucumber, garlic, and dried mint. Simple, cold, and sharp. The host raises his spoon and pauses, eyes scanning the room. Everyone else freezes. He finally dips his spoon and eats. It's a signal. Conversation begins, not with words, but with gestures. A woman across the room takes a bite, then slowly presses a napkin to her lips, her eyes never leaving the man beside her. He responds not with words, but by slicing a fig in half and offering her one half on his dagger tip. No one laughs. This is not a joke. This is courtship, performed through food, laced with danger. In these rooms, love letters were made of pickles and sighs. Of course, it wasn't always consensual. There's an old tale of a young courtier who misunderstood the rules. He offered a lady his pomegranate seeds before the host had spoken. She accepted. Their families feuded. The courtier disappeared. His last known whereabouts? A monastery in the mountains, where he supposedly lived out his days growing quince and refusing to speak. Historians still argue whether the tale is a moral fable or a veiled reference to one of the Shah's more discreet purges. Speaking of misunderstandings, let's detour to tonight's sex story. Inside the harem of Sultan Sanjar, sometime around 1140, a new concubine named Shirin arrived with little understanding of courtly customs. She was beautiful, dangerously so, and educated in poetry, which made her even more volatile. One night, after a banquet heavy with sweet rice and wine, Shirin accidentally sat in the place designated for the Sultan's favorite consort. The room froze. Rather than punish her, the Sultan laughed, claiming the rice must have carried her into that seat. Later, they say, he visited her chamber under the guise of inspecting the menu for the next feast. She was pregnant within the year. The favorite consort, by the way, mysteriously developed a nut allergy and never returned to court. Now back to your spoon. It's silver, engraved with a verse from Rumi. The wound is where the light enters you. Comforting, or ominous. You dip it into a dish of eggplant stew, Koresh badamjan, dark, slow-cooked, flecked with tangy dried lime and saffron. The taste is melancholy and exquisite. You understand suddenly why people might weep into their meals here. Because in this world, food is never neutral. It's persuasion, performance, prophecy. You reach for your wine. Wait. That's right. Officially, you shouldn't have any. Wine, under Islamic rule, was forbidden. And yet, here it is. Deep red. Poured from a decanter shaped like a phoenix, rising from fire. This is Shiraz wine, famous across continents, smuggled through scriptural loopholes and consumed behind doors like these. The law bans it. The elite toast with it. Hypocrisy? Perhaps. Tradition? Definitely. Even the poets got in on it. Hafiz wrote verse after verse about wine, not just as drink, but as divine metaphor, as sensual rebellion, as holy confusion. You sip. It's spiced, strong, slightly bitter at the back of the tongue, like a memory you shouldn't still enjoy. Next comes a dish of lamb kebabs drizzled with date syrup and garnished with rose petals. The combination of meat and floral sweetness plays tricks on your palate. You remember the servant's earlier warning about the quince? You glance around. No one else seems worried. And yet, each bite feels like a gamble. Who prepared this dish? Who requested it? In a culture where cooks were often privy to the most private desires and schemes, trust in the kitchen was as important as trust in bed. And now a quirky little tidbit to chew on. Literally. There was once a cookbook circulated in secret through merchant households that included a chapter titled The Erotic Tongue. It wasn't what you think. It included instructions on how to carve fruit with your tongue alone, as a party trick. One recipe, the persimmon paradox, required you to peel and shape a persimmon in such a way that it resembled your lover's face. Get it wrong, and tradition demanded you bite its mouth and spit it across the room. A surprising number of divorces apparently began this way. The host clears his throat. Dessert is arriving. Bastani, saffron ice cream with bits of frozen cream and pistachio, served in cold metal bowls. But before you can eat, there's a pause. Everyone watches as a servant approaches a woman seated alone. He offers her a bowl. She refuses. Offers again. Refuses again. Third time, she accepts. You realize, slowly, you've just watched a ritualized rejection dance. 3 refusals is polite. A 4th would be humiliation. She eats slowly. Everyone breathes again. As the evening fades into murmurs and candle smoke, a musician plucks the opening notes of a love ballad known to trigger tears in even the toughest courtiers. You feel yourself sink deeper into the cushions, lulled by the sounds, the scents, the lingering spice on your lips. And yet, even here, the rules never sleep. Someone laughs too loudly. A dish is passed too early. A pair of eyes meet too long. You feel it, the tension, the invisible strings that hold this whole scene in balance. Break one and the whole thing shatters. So you sit still, spoon in hand, and play your part. You don't see the hammam until it's already swallowed you whole. The heat hits first, dense, humid, perfumed with steam and secrets. Your breath shortens, not because it's hard to breathe, but because your body suddenly understands this place isn't just for bathing, it's for unveiling. A marble hallway slick with condensation leads you inward, where naked stone statues leak quiet judgment and the air is heavy with orange blossom water, sweat, and whatever's left of someone's shame. You tug at the collar of your robe. Yes, you were given one at the entrance, silk-threaded, barely decent, and the fabric clings like nervous fingertips. The lamps overhead are dim, deliberately so, their flickering reflections turning the water's surface into a moving mirror. You glimpse yourself distorted, part visitor, part voyeur, part something softer. Then the shadows shift, and someone steps out of the mist. A woman, bare to the waist, hair pinned with a silver comb, walks past without a word. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. You're already disarmed. The Persian hammam, in its golden age, was never just a bathhouse. It was diplomacy in steam, eroticism by proximity, and occasionally, just occasionally, a crime scene. Here, the line between ritual and temptation was no thicker than the steam rising off your thighs. Every court had its preferred bathhouse, and each was known for its unique aroma signature. One used sandalwood and rose, another favored frankincense and honey, a third, scandalously, was rumored to pipe in musk extracted from deer glands, And the implications of that, well, don't think too hard. As you move deeper into the chamber, a hand gently touches your elbow, guiding you toward the central pool. You step in, and the water is warmer than blood. Around you, bodies float lazily, draped in linen cloths that hide nothing and promise less. You sit, you breathe, you sweat. It's here, in this wet cocoon, that politics unravel faster than silk. Ministers who won't look each other in the eye in court will lock knees under the water here. Deals are brokered between soapings. Betrayals are whispered as if part of the ritual chant. And when someone wants you to disappear, they don't call an assassin. They suggest a steam bath. You'll feel so much better afterward, they say. One historical record describes a noble drowning in a hammam, his last breath infused with cardamom and regret. Historians still argue whether it was suicide or a very polite murder. Tonight, though, the danger is subtler. You catch sight of a man across the pool, a poet, judging by the ink stains at his wrist. He's laughing softly with a woman wearing nothing but coal and confidence. Their conversation flows like bathwater, warm, circular, indecent, if overheard. You pretend not to listen. But then you hear your name. Not spoken loudly, but breathed. You turn. No one acknowledges it. Was it the steam, or the start of something? A young attendant approaches you with a tray holding 3 jars. Scrub, scent, soak, he says, bowing slightly. The first jar contains a gritty paste, salt, apricot kernel, powdered rose petal. You rub it onto your skin and feel it pull away not just dirt, but memory. The second jar holds oil, pomegranate seed, and something citrusy, maybe bergamot. He pours a few drops into your palm, watches as you rub it into your arms. The third is more ambiguous. You dip your fingers into a pearly solution that smells like fresh linen and danger. He says nothing, just smiles. And now for the story you didn't ask for, but can't stop thinking about. In 1087, a eunuch named Farouk was tasked with maintaining the hammam used by the Shah's favored consorts. His role was more than janitorial. He kept order, arranged schedules, even suggested which oils best complemented which moods. One afternoon, Lady Samira, barefoot, furious and reportedly drunk on fermented dates, stormed in unannounced and demanded a private steam. Farouk, unable to refuse, stayed to ensure protocol. The steam thickened. She asked about his past. He answered. She asked about the Shah's new lover. He hesitated. She touched his cheek. He didn't move. What happened next is disputed. Some say she kissed him, others that she only whispered a secret in his ear. What's agreed on, she died that night, and Farouk vanished. Some say he became a mystic, living in the hills and writing love poems under a new name. Others say he was boiled alive in that very hammam. The Shah, notably, ordered new plumbing installed the next week. You lie back, letting the water lap at your collarbone. The ceiling above is domed, pierced with tiny holes that mimic constellations. Starlight, or something pretending to be it, glimmers faintly overhead. You think of all the bodies that have bathed here, all the schemes floated on water before yours. A woman beside you sighs as an attendant pours warm water over her shoulders, slow as syrup. You wonder what she's done to earn that luxury, or what she's about to do. Near the far wall, a group begins the traditional hammam massage ritual. It looks gentle. It's not. One man yelps as his limbs are cracked and pressed, his back scrubbed raw with a horsehair mitt. The attendant performing it hums a lullaby, a strange contrast. Pain and comfort, abrasion and intimacy. The woman watching him winces in sympathy, or maybe amusement. You're not sure which. You turn back, close your eyes, let the steam enter your mouth and blur your thoughts. And just when you begin to drift, the air shifts. The scent changes, suddenly sharper, headier. You open your eyes and see her. She walks in barefoot, Her robe opened just enough to reveal a chain of coins dangling from her waist, clinking like temptation. Her eyes sweep the room like a slow flame. She chooses a spot near you. Not next to, not far, just strategic. She dips a toe into the water, then the rest. She doesn't look at you, but she knows you're looking. She leans back. Her robe floats around her like seaweed. Another story comes to mind, whether you want it or not. A visiting diplomat from Byzantium once insisted on bringing his own hammam protocol, which included singing during bathing. This predictably caused confusion and minor scandal. But the twist? One of his songs was a coded hymn from an outlawed sect, one that had ties to a rebellious Persian poet. The overlap triggered weeks of investigation, 2 accidental arrests, and the banning of that melody in every bathhouse south of Esfahan. Yet somehow, centuries later, a version of it is still hummed during massage rituals. And just like that, the spell begins to lift. The water cools. The attendants return with towels, crisp and warm. You step out, skin tingling, robe clinging to your hips like a secret you haven't yet decided to tell. Outside, the air is cooler, drier, but the scents still linger on your skin. Saffron, sweat, and something floral you can't name. You leave the hammam changed, not cleansed. Nothing here is that simple. But aware, more attuned, more dangerous maybe. You don't know if anyone heard the name whispered through steam. You don't know what was in that third jar. But you do know this. Once a place has seen you without your mask, it never forgets. You wake to the sound of silk rustling like leaves caught in a warm wind, and for a moment you don't know where you are. Just that your mouth tastes faintly of pistachios and rosewater, and your skin still remembers the heat of the bath like a ghost's embrace. The room is unfamiliar, but not unfriendly. Candles flicker in low sconces shaped like lotus petals, and outside a lattice window, the sun is just beginning to flirt with the horizon. Morning in medieval Persia isn't a quiet affair. It's sensual, assertive, laced with aroma. Somewhere nearby, fresh bread is being pulled from a clay oven. You smell it before you hear the laughter of the baker's daughter, echoing through the alley like flirtation disguised as song. Your stomach growls, but hunger here is never just about food. You rise, drape yourself in a robe that wasn't yours the night before, and follow your nose to a secluded garden where breakfast has been set for 1, or maybe for 2, depending on who joins you. A single pomegranate sits in the center of the table, cracked open, seeds glistening like rubies under a veil of morning mist, and suddenly your breath catches. Because in Persia, pomegranates aren't just fruit, they're loaded weapons. Legend tells of a queen who used to seduce rivals with nothing but pomegranates and a silk scarf. She would invite them to a private orchard, slice the fruit open with a single fingernail, and feed them seed by seed, each one paired with a story about betrayal. By the time the fruit was gone, her rivals were in love, or ruined. Sometimes both. The act of feeding someone pomegranate seeds, especially in private, carried so many possible meanings that an entire etiquette manual once dedicated 6 pages to decoding the gesture. It could mean love, yes, but also challenge, temptation, or a veiled threat. It all depended on whether the feeder used their right hand, their left, or their mouth. You pick up the fruit. Your fingers stain immediately. You don't eat it. Not yet. A woman enters the garden. Not the one from the bathhouse. This one wears a robe of green and gold, her hair braided with threads of silver. She doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't have to. You know her type. Dangerous, disciplined, deadly with a serving spoon. She sits across from you and begins to peel a fig, slow and deliberate, her eyes never leaving yours. "Do you know the story of the fig seller and the boy who lied?" she asks. You don't. She smiles. "Then you'll appreciate breakfast more." She gestures, and servants arrive with a small spread. Flatbread, herbs, cheese rolled with mint, boiled eggs drizzled with olive oil, and a honeycomb so fresh it's still dripping. There's also a dish of walnuts soaked in pomegranate molasses, which she warns are aphrodisiacal in an inconvenient way. You laugh, too quickly. She notices. Everything here is observed. And speaking of inconvenient aphrodisiacs, let's talk about that one dinner recorded in the diary of a minor vizier who served under Sultan Tughril. According to his entry from 1054, the Sultan hosted a private evening for a visiting princess and served her a dish of pomegranate glazed duck, heavily seasoned with coriander and ground cloves. The problem? The combination was known to provoke restless limbs, a euphemism for desires best left dormant during diplomacy. The princess reportedly threw herself at one of the guards, who, being a eunuch, was both alarmed and unresponsive. The scandal that followed nearly caused a war. The dish was quietly banned for 3 weeks. Then someone else brought it back at a wedding because, naturally, no one ever learns. Your own breakfast proceeds cautiously. You taste the cheese, soft, creamy, sour. You sip warm milk perfumed with cardamom. The woman across from you tells a story with every bite. How her grandmother seduced a caravan leader with nothing but melon and a poem. How figs left in sunlight too long ferment just enough to cause dizziness and inspiration. How her cousin once traded a basket of barberries for a night with a man who later became a monk. She says she can still taste the regret, the woman murmurs, wiping honey from her lip. You're not sure whether you're being tested, trained, or seduced. Probably all three. And then comes the scholarly wrinkle. Historians still argue whether women like her, aristocrats with access to both the kitchen and the political court, were actual power players or merely ornamental. The documents suggest both. One letter preserved in the archive of Isfahan's court refers to a certain Lady S as she who seasons both lamb and rumor, suggesting her influence extended beyond recipes. But another court chronicler dismissed her as a distraction in silk, useful only for disarming foreign spies. Of course, his body was later found in a granary, stuffed into a barley sack with dried apricots in his mouth. No one dared to claim the symbolism. You finally eat a pomegranate seed. It explodes in your mouth, sweet, tart, and full of implications. The woman nods. You've accepted the invitation, she says. Now you must answer. But before you can ask what that means, she stands, brushes invisible crumbs from her robe, and disappears into the shaded hallway, her scent lingering like unfinished poetry. You sit in silence for a moment, replaying every word, every gesture. Was it a seduction? A warning? A lesson? All of the above? You're still not sure, but the pomegranate's aftertaste stays with you, metallic and romantic, like the closing line of a letter you never got to send. And for your quirky footnote of the day, in the city of Qazvin, there existed a secret society of fruit interpreters, yes, really, who claimed that any person's fate could be foretold based on their reaction to tasting different fruits blindfolded. The society was outlawed after one of its members convinced a merchant to leave his family and fortune behind for a single quince. The merchant never returned. The quince apparently was exceptional. As breakfast ends, a servant brings a small basin and pours rose water over your fingers. You breathe in, exhale slowly. And just as you think the moment is over, a folded note is placed beside your plate. No name, no seal. Inside, a single sentence written in looping Persian script. The seeds you swallow today will bloom by moonlight. You close your eyes. You're not sure if it's a prophecy, a threat, or just an invitation to dinner. But either way, you know this much. Nothing in Persia is ever served without consequence. You leave the garden with that note still burning in your hand, the scent of rosewater lingering in your pores, and the distinct feeling that you've just walked out of a test you didn't study for, but somehow passed anyway. The hallway is cool and quiet, lined with niches holding brass oil lamps, their flames swaying slightly, as if exhaling secrets. You pass by a tapestry embroidered with grapevines twisting into words, verses from Rumi, no doubt, though your eyes can't focus on the poetry when your mind is already grappling with what came next. The letter, the woman, the seed you swallowed. You can't shake the image of her smile, curved just enough to imply knowledge you'll never fully unlock. A servant meets you at the corridor's end and leads you through a series of turning corridors, spiraling inward, deeper into the private quarters of the estate. It's darker here, the kind of dark that makes whispers sound louder and footsteps feel more committed. Then, suddenly, you arrive. A room flooded in candlelight, every surface casting reflections in warm gold. And in the center, a table, round, low, with a solitary tea set. You're told to sit. You obey. A woman enters. Not the one from before, not any of the others you've glimpsed. This one is older, regal, sharp. Her presence slices through the room like the tip of a scimitar. Her robe is embroidered with phoenixes. Her rings clink as she pours tea from a long spouted pot into a cup so delicate you fear your breath might crack it. She pushes the cup toward you. "Drink," she says, "but slowly. This one has teeth." You bring it to your lips and sip. It's floral, complex, hot, with a backbite of something smoky. Cloves, maybe? Maybe not. She watches you like a scholar studying a suspect text. "Do you know what's in that?" she asks. You don't answer. She smiles. "Good. This is not casual tea. This is a potion, a message in a cup." In medieval Persia, tea wasn't just a beverage, it was an alchemical event. Ingredients weren't chosen for flavor, but for what they evoked. Rose petals for memory, saffron for desire, basil for clarity. And sometimes, in the darker corners of society, something a bit more manipulative. Love potions weren't myths here. They were recipes, circulated among the literate elite, often disguised in cookbooks as harmless infusions. One anonymous volume from the 12th century, known as the Green Book of Feasts, included a tea labeled Preparation for Marital Harmony, which modern scholars believe was a mood-altering concoction involving poppy sap, crushed pearl, and essence of mint. 1 teaspoon, they claimed, could render a reluctant bride pliable in both thought and thigh. 2 teaspoons? Rumor said it might turn her into a prophet or a ghost, depending on the moon. Your hostess pours her own cup. Her hands are steady. Her jewelry jingles with each motion like an echo of the room's hidden tension. She takes a sip, sighs contentedly, then sets the cup down with a tap. "Tea," she murmurs, "is how we speak when speech is too blunt." She leans in. "And you are about to hear a story that only tea can survive." And so the tale unfolds. She speaks of a concubine named Ziba, whose tea was famous across Shiraz. Ziba brewed with a precision that bordered on madness, using rainwater collected from rooftop tiles, saffron filaments counted in prime numbers, and tea leaves aged precisely 29 days. Men came from distant provinces just to taste her brews. One man, an ambitious courtier with eyes on the throne, visited her each week for months, claiming her tea gave him dreams of clarity. He became bolder, riskier. Then, one morning, he was found slumped over a table, his tongue blackened, his lips stained with something vaguely floral. Poison? Likely. But no one could prove it. Ziba was questioned, her kitchen searched. Nothing was found. The court doctor simply shrugged. He drank clarity. Perhaps he saw too much. Ziba continued brewing. Her next tea was called Sleep Without Regret. You look down at your own cup, now nearly empty. The older woman eyes you with quiet amusement. "Don't worry," she says. "If I wanted you dead, I would have served something sweeter." She stands. "But there is one more course tonight." She claps her hands and the doors open again. A younger woman steps in, carrying a tray. Delicate sweets, sugared violets, slivers of candied orange peel, and at the center, a small golden cake topped with what looks like crushed opal. "This," the older woman says, "is called the heart's bargain. You'll take a bite, and then I'll ask you a question. If you lie, you'll cough. If you hesitate, you'll sweat. If you're honest, we'll both know." You hesitate. She notices. Or you can decline. But then, you'll never learn who left you that note in the garden. You take the bite. The texture is impossible to describe, like silk turning to fire. Your tongue tingles. Your chest warms. Your breath catches. She smiles. "Good," she says. "Now tell me, what are you hungry for?" And that's the real question, isn't it? In this world where flavors are flirtations, where a sprinkle of cinnamon could spell seduction or death, what is it you're really craving? Knowledge, power, intimacy, revenge. The room waits with you. Even the candles seem to lean in. And while you consider your answer, here's your quirky detail of the night. In Tabriz, there existed a guild of potion makers whose brews were only legal if they passed the mirror test, meaning the server had to look at their own reflection while pouring it. If their hand trembled or their gaze faltered, the tea was deemed cursed. One apprentice, desperate to pass, practiced for weeks with plain water. When the day came, he passed with flying colors, only to find out his teacher had replaced the test potion with ink. The guests were furious, but the color reportedly was divine. Back in your candlelit prison of questions and cake, the older woman chuckles. "Take your time," she says. "We have until dawn, and answers given in haste tend to sour faster than milk in summer. So you sit, in a room full of eyes you can't see, with your pulse drumming in your ears and the aftertaste of a spell blooming on your tongue. And you realize something. Not every poison is meant to kill. Some are meant to reveal. And this one? This one is just beginning to take hold." You never give her an answer. Not really. You open your mouth to speak but stop short of truth because you realize that in this room, every word has weight, and the air is too thick with expectation to carry anything but performance. So instead you smile, that soft, evasive kind of smile that invites interpretation but commits to nothing. The older woman nods, amused, and waves you away like a cat bored of its prey. You leave with your pulse racing and your taste buds still whispering secrets you're not sure you want to understand. The hallway outside is darker than before. You walk slower now, not from fear but reverence. This place, this estate, this city, this culture, it doesn't just feed you. It studies how you chew. You emerge into a cool courtyard just as twilight tightens its grip. Shadows stretch long and low across mosaic tiles, and lanterns flicker to life with the lazy indifference of creatures used to long nights. You hear music somewhere, lute and flute, light as flirtation. You follow it through a gate and down a narrow path bordered with low citrus trees, their blossoms releasing the kind of perfume that makes you forgive every betrayal you've ever endured. Ahead, laughter trickles through the air, playful and unsteady. You turn a corner and find yourself face to face with a group of young men and women lounging on cushions around a low table, absolutely drowning in wine. Not concealed, not whispered about, bold, proud, flowing freely. This despite the very public ban on alcohol that hangs over the empire like a divine sword. And here's the paradox. Wine in medieval Persia was illegal in theory and essential in practice. Officially condemned under Islamic law, yet privately worshipped by poets, scholars, and rulers alike. The state denounced it. The people distilled it. Imams preached abstinence by day and nursed hangovers by dawn. Wine was sin and scripture, poison and prayer. It was the stuff of ecstatic verse, of forbidden love, of euphoric surrender. You don't know this yet, but tonight you will drink from the same goblet that once passed through the lips of a traitor and a prophet, and depending on your mood, you'll be either or both by morning. A girl offers you a glass, her hands henna-stained and steady. "It's Shiraz," she says, as if that explains everything. And it does. Shiraz, the city of poets, gardens, and fermentation. This isn't the wine of the West, heavy, bitter, defensive. This is warm, floral, subtly spicy, like drinking sunlight filtered through a silk veil. You sip. It's not just good, it's enlightening. The conversation swells around you, surfacing and submerging like fish in a shallow pool. One man recites Hafiz with dramatic flair, another counters with Rumi, and a third insists both were secretly drunk when they wrote their best lines. Wine, someone says, is the only truth with a hangover. And now, the sex story. At a court banquet in 1065, a minor princess named Dilara, known for her sharp tongue and sharper cheekbones, reportedly seduced not one but 3 of the Shah's scribes in a single evening, using nothing but wine and wordplay. She began with toasts, praising each man for his handwriting, his wit, his choice of ink. Then, as the evening unfurled and the goblets deepened, she began a game. Whoever could write a poem on the spot using the word grape in 4 different meanings would win a kiss. All 3 tried. One succeeded. His prize? A kiss that, according to court records, lasted the length of a sunset and caused a diplomatic delay. The Shah was furious. Dilara was unrepentant. The poem? Lost, unfortunately. Or buried in someone's private library, waiting to ruin another generation. Back at the wine table, someone tells you the Sultan's private cellar was rumored to be shaped like a crescent moon, with each chamber aging wine by astrological sign. Taurus vintages were considered bold and earthy. Scorpio wines were reserved for nights of betrayal. You're handed a second glass, this one darker, more potent. "Scorpio," she whispers. You hesitate. Then you drink. There's something about the heat of alcohol mixing with the scent of jasmine in the night air that makes secrets feel inevitable. Stories begin to spill about a court cook who infused wine with poppy oil and claimed it allowed people to speak only in truth, about a mystic who drank to erase time and found himself predicting events that hadn't happened yet. Historians still argue whether his visions were divine or the side effect of moldy grapes, but the effect was the same. Wine was a door, not just to pleasure, but to altered perception. And tonight, you step through that door. A servant arrives, not with food, but with a platter of ripe fruit. Grapes, of course, but also melon, pear, and slices of quince dusted with cinnamon. You pick one at random, not realizing that in some circles, the fruit you choose at a wine gathering is interpreted like a tarot card. Melon means you crave honesty. Pear means you're hiding something. Quince means you're dangerously nostalgic. You bite. It's quince. The girl watching you raises an eyebrow. "Of course," she says. You look like someone who'd fall in love with a ghost. And now the evening begins to shift. Music becomes slower, richer. Conversations dip lower, punctuated with laughter and long pauses. Someone is weeping quietly in the corner. No one asks why. That's not impolite here. That's just a sign the wine is working. And you? You feel everything at once. The heat of the wine, the memory of the bath, the sting of the older woman's question, and the weight of the note still folded in your pocket. The world feels liquid, suspended between verses. And just when you think the night has peaked, a door opens, and a new guest arrives. He's older, but sharp, dressed not in silk, but in soft cotton, marked by rings of ink around his fingers. A scholar. He sits, pours a glass, looks you straight in the eye. "What's more intoxicating?" he asks. "The wine, or the reason you needed it?" The table falls silent. You don't answer. You don't have to. He smiles. "That's why you're still drinking." Quirky side fact. There was a custom among some Persian philosophers to mix philosophy with intoxication deliberately. They called it drunken reason. The goal was to argue under the influence, to see which truths survived the haze. Some schools outlawed it, others made it mandatory. There are entire treatises that begin with the phrase, composed under Shiraz moonlight, with 2 cups and 1 regret. And tonight, you're living that footnote. You sip, you sigh. You don't know if the stars are actually moving or if your vision is just that soft now. But either way, you realize something important. Here in medieval Persia, sin and beauty often wear the same perfume. And once you've tasted both in the same night, plain water will never satisfy you again. You wake not in your bed, but on a silk-draped divan under a sky so full of stars, it looks like it might collapse under its own weight. Your head is heavy with Shiraz wine and unfinished verses, your body scented with ash, musk, and regret. Around you, the courtyard is silent, except for the soft rustle of date palms in the early breeze and the distant drip-drip of a forgotten fountain. Somewhere, someone is still humming the tail end of a love song that started 3 goblets ago. You sit up, slowly. Your robe is askew. Your mouth tastes like a poem that's gone sour, and your mind is blank in that luxurious, terrifying way that means you definitely said too much last night. A silver tray has been left beside you. On it, warm water with mint, a slice of honeyed bread, and a single note written in a careful hand. Meet me before the sun touches the dome. Bring nothing but silence. It's unsigned. Of course it is. You've learned by now that names here are less important than timing. You wander through the half-sleeping estate like a ghost in borrowed skin until you find a side door ajar, just wide enough to let the wind whisper through. Beyond it, a narrow path snakes through a grove of cypress trees and descends into a small marble structure half buried in the hillside. A shrine, perhaps, or something older. Inside, candles float in bowls of water, casting rings of gold against the domed ceiling. And in the center, on a pile of cushions arranged like a fallen throne, sits a man with ink-stained fingers and a smile that looks like it's been rewritten 1,000 times. "Welcome," he says. "You're late." You're not. But lateness, here, is never about time. It's about readiness. He gestures for you to sit. He pours tea. Not the sharp, perfumed kind you've grown used to, but something darker, spiced with cloves and silence. "You've eaten," he says. "You've drunk. You've bathed in steam and language. Now it's time you understood what all that was preparing you for." You raise an eyebrow. "Poetry," he says, with no irony at all. This is where things get more complicated. In medieval Persia, poetry wasn't decoration. It was currency, power, seduction, heresy, prayer. It was a kind of alchemy, capable of turning the mundane into the divine and the divine into scandal. Entire political careers rose and fell on the back of a couplet. Love affairs began with a metaphor and ended with exile. The Shah himself kept a court poet, not to flatter him, but to interpret his moods through verse. And if that poet wrote something too honest, well, there's always another poet. The man before you is one of those survivors. A Sufi by title, a poet by profession, and something else entirely by reputation. "Words," he says, "are the only thing more dangerous than wine in this place, and the only thing worth drinking twice." He hands you a book, leather-bound and well-worn. You open it. Every page is a trap disguised as a truth. Verses about gardens that are actually about bodies. Odes to God that ache like longing for someone you shouldn't touch. Parables about birds that, on closer inspection, are detailed guides to rebellion. One poem, short and sharp, reads, "He kissed me with a prayer on his lips. I answered with blasphemy." You pause. The poet watches your face. That one got me banned from Isfahan, he says, and into someone's bed in Tabriz. So, a fair exchange. You read another. Her voice was soft as pomegranate flesh, but her silence could salt the earth. You don't know whether to be aroused or afraid. Probably both. That's how good poetry works here. It disturbs. It unbuttons. It reorders your thoughts. And speaking of unbuttoning, here comes tonight's sex story. In 1093, a Sufi mystic named Rahman gained notoriety for composing a series of erotic poems disguised as devotional chants. One verse described the curve of a beloved's spine as the path toward divine understanding. Another compared the mouth to a temple from which all gods fall. The poems spread through the city like wildfire, igniting both desire and doctrinal outrage. Rahman was summoned to court, where the Shah demanded an explanation. Rahman, reportedly drunk on fig wine, recited a new verse on the spot comparing the Shah's temper to an overcooked kebab, tough, hot, and poorly seasoned. He was jailed for a week. Upon release, he was invited to tutor the Shah's youngest son in literature. Persia's relationship with poetry, you see, was never linear. The poet across from you sets down his cup. Every generation has its own verse that ruins everything, he says. Yours is coming. You want to laugh, but your skin prickles. He leans forward. And when it does, make sure it's worth the scandal. Then he recites, low and slow. She asked for a love poem. I gave her a recipe for surviving heartbreak, disguised as a dessert. You realize he's not speaking metaphorically. Recipes here are coded texts. A well-placed clove, a missing fig, a spoon of honey too short. Messages passed between lovers, spies, dissidents. Food as subtext, poetry as encryption. You think back to every dish you've eaten since arriving. You wonder what you missed, what you swallowed unknowingly. And now, your quirky detail for the hour. There existed in Kashan a secret society of poetic bakers, men and women who created elaborate sweets embedded with verses in sugared ink. The sweets were delivered during festivals, weddings, even funerals. Some verses were romantic, some political. One baker, infamous for her candied rose petals, was eventually arrested after a sweet she sent to a merchant's wife was revealed to contain a poem encouraging rebellion against the caliph. Her sentence? She was forced to bake for the palace. Every dish was tasted, every word inspected. But she never stopped writing. She simply got better at hiding it. You finish your tea. The poet stands. Take this, he says, handing you the book. Don't read it all at once. Some verses need to steep. You step outside into the early morning light, the sky bleeding pink and gold. The city is waking slowly, stretching itself into routine. But you feel different. You've sipped from a cup no law can ban. You've tasted something more potent than wine. And now, everything feels like a verse waiting to happen. The wind feels like rhyme. The stones beneath your feet echo with meter. You walk through the garden, the poet's book pressed to your chest, knowing full well that somewhere in these pages is a line that could destroy you. And still, you want to read it. You're halfway through a bowl of saffron rice when you realize you might be at your own execution. The air is too quiet. The spices too fragrant. The way the silverware clinks feels choreographed, like an overture to something you won't see coming. You're seated on a crimson cushion in a room that smells like cinnamon and inevitability, and every bite you take feels like a test you can't afford to fail. The table is low, circular, and set with the kind of precision only seen at royal banquets or state funerals. Around you sit 5 other guests, silent, blinking too rarely, chewing too carefully. They don't introduce themselves. You don't ask. Because this isn't a dinner party. This is something older, something darker. You're at what the locals whisper about as a feast of reckoning. A death row dinner without the gallows. Where enemies break bread, lovers exchange farewells, and traitors receive their final glass of wine. You swallow slowly, the rice soft and floral on your tongue. It tastes too perfect. That's the problem. The man across from you wears a robe embroidered with falcons, his fingers tapping the stem of his goblet like he's trying to count down your pulse. He catches your gaze, tilts his head slightly, then shifts his eyes toward the next dish being served. It's duck, roasted, lacquered with pomegranate syrup, stuffed with barberries and walnuts. Gorgeous, menacing. The kind of dish that could seduce you into forgiveness or trap you into silence. You hesitate. He smiles. In Persian cuisine, he murmurs, the more effort in the dish, the more certain the intention. This one took 8 hours. You nod. It's a warning dressed in hospitality. Historians still argue whether the death banquets in Persian courts were symbolic or functional. Some say they were elaborate forgiveness rituals, where the accused were given one last luxurious night to clear their conscience. Others believe it was a way to lull someone into lowering their guard. Poison wasn't just a powder in a goblet, but a pattern of behavior, a rhythm. Once the host knew exactly when your breath paused, when your body softened from pleasure, that's when the final bite arrived. Untraceable, undeniable, and irreversible. Your cup is refilled. Not wine this time, but a heavy pomegranate cordial thickened with honey and cardamom. The kind of drink you don't sip, you commit to it. As you lift it to your lips, you remember a poem from the book the Sufi poet gave you. I drank her bitterness in a goblet made of promises and died with a kiss on my teeth. You lower the cup. The man across from you frowns, just barely. A signal? A disappointment? It's hard to say. One of the women at the table lets out a sudden laugh, too loud, too sharp. Everyone freezes. She waves it off. Sorry. The lamb just reminded me of something foolish. An old love. Or maybe just indigestion. No one laughs with her. She's testing the edges, seeing who moves, who flinches. She doesn't eat again. Now let's indulge in tonight's sex story. In 1118, the court of Seljuk Sultan Mahmud was rocked by the sudden death of his most trusted general. Official cause, heart failure during a feast. Unofficial rumor? He was seduced by a foreign dancer who slipped him a slice of honey-soaked pistachio cake laced with ground nightshade. The dancer vanished that night, leaving behind only a poem etched into her wine goblet. He tasted me last, and called it dessert. Years later, the same recipe surfaced in a cookbook disguised as a manual for entertaining foreign diplomats. The cake became known in certain circles as the widow's slice. It was eventually banned in court kitchens, but never entirely disappeared. One baker reportedly kept the recipe alive through coded rhymes baked into sesame crackers. Back at your table, dessert has arrived, and it's unsettlingly beautiful. A dish of stewed quinces shaped like hearts, floating in a syrup of rose water and clove, garnished with slivers of almond and thin curls of candied orange peel. The woman beside you whispers, "They say if your reflection appears in the syrup before your spoon touches it, you're not going to survive the night." You look. Nothing. Just syrup. And yet your hand trembles as you lift the spoon. It's delicious, of course. Sweet, perfumed, a little tart. But the aftertaste lingers strangely, like saying goodbye in the wrong language. Then, silence. No one speaks. No one moves. The servants withdraw. The lights dim. And the host, yes, there is a host, you've forgotten him until now, finally rises. He's older than he looks, draped in black velvet, his beard braided with silver threads. His voice is soft, but surgical. "You've all eaten well," he says. "May your bodies remember tonight long after your minds forget." Then he turns to you directly. And you. What was your favorite bite? The room waits. The air holds its breath. You answer honestly. Something about the lamb with coriander and cinnamon. He nods. Interesting. That dish has a long memory. Then he walks out, leaving his shadow behind. The guests begin to rise. No one makes eye contact. You leave last. The hallway feels longer now, like it's grown bones overnight. The scent of cardamom clings to your clothes. You wonder what your favorite bite really meant. You wonder who cooked it. You wonder if the flavor will ever leave your tongue. Probably not. And now, your quirky detail of the night. There was once a Persian superstition that if a guest died during a feast, the tablecloth had to be burned within an hour or the soul would linger. As a result, high-ranking hosts always kept backup cloths on hand. Some nobles even served their enemies on disposable linen just in case. One paranoid governor reportedly insisted that every dish be served on individual leaves, not because it was elegant, but because it made cleanup quicker in case someone overreacted to a suspicious stew. You wander back toward your quarters, every footstep echoing like a drumbeat. The stars above are hazier now, like they're watching you through steamed glass. You don't feel poisoned. Not yet. But something is definitely changing inside you. Not your stomach, your awareness, your understanding of what a feast really means in this world. It's not about nourishment. It's a ritual, a reveal, a weapon. You pass a servant carrying a tray of leftover desserts and wonder who will eat what you didn't finish. You consider asking. Then think better of it. Tonight, you survived. Or did you? There's still time for the last bite to take effect. There's still a chance that the most dangerous flavor hasn't even touched your lips yet. There's something suspicious about the quiet of the Shah's garden at night. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you, but the kind that pricks at the back of your neck, like a lull before something breaks. The air is too still, the vines too obedient. The nightingales? Silent. Which, in Persia, is basically a diplomatic incident. You step onto the garden path paved with glazed turquoise tiles that glimmer under the moonlight like a river, frozen mid-song. Jasmine coils around the columns like it's listening in. You smell saffron on the wind, and somewhere, beneath that familiar floral sweet perfume, there's a trace of something metallic. Not blood, yet. Just tension. This garden is not meant for the public. It's the private Eden of the Shah himself, a space so curated, it's more stage than sanctuary. And tonight, it's the scene of a melon party. Yes, a melon party. You're led toward a pavilion by a servant whose robe is embroidered with tiny silver pomegranates, each one rumored to represent a secret he's been paid to keep. On a stone table inside the pavilion are 5 watermelons, sliced and chilled over blocks of ice carried from the mountains. Nearby, musicians tune instruments that will eventually play background music for betrayal. You are not the guest of honor, but you are seated close enough to hear things you shouldn't. The Shah enters with the confidence of a man whose enemies have all been poisoned or promoted. He's flanked by his favored courtiers, including a young general whose beauty could cause diplomatic incidents, and an older vizier with eyebrows like thunderclouds. Everyone is smiling too much, the kind of smiling that smells like fear. They start with small talk, how the orange trees are doing this season, the scandalously tender quail from last week's hunt, a poem someone heard that might or might not be treason. Then comes the main event. A large golden tray is brought forward, carrying slices of melon sprinkled with lime, mint, and rosewater. The first bite is taken by the Shah. He chews. He smiles. Everyone laughs too loudly. Then the slicing begins again. Knives flash in candlelight, precise and rhythmic, and suddenly you're aware that everyone is watching how everyone else eats. The knives aren't just for melon, they're for signals. And here it comes. Tonight's political trap dressed up as dessert. A slice of melon is offered to the young general, not by the Shah, but by the vizier. A gesture that looks harmless, generous even. But it isn't. Because here, offering someone fruit is an act of power, of implication. You offer a slice, you imply debt. You accept it. You owe. The general hesitates, smiles. Then he takes the slice. The vizier bows. The Shah says nothing, but his fingers tighten around the stem of his wine cup. This is how betrayals begin in Persia, not with daggers, but with garnished melon. Your mind drifts to another tale whispered through the kitchens. In 1127, at a garden gathering much like this one, a noble woman named Parvane was said to have orchestrated the downfall of a provincial governor using only a plum, a fan, and 2 words spoken into the right ear at the wrong moment. She'd sat beneath a cherry tree, eating fruit so slowly it made married men look away. When the governor approached, she whispered something, no one ever recorded what, and offered him a fig. 3 weeks later, he was found guilty of embezzlement and exiled to a village so remote it didn't appear on any map. Some said the charges were fabricated. Others said the fig had been filled with crushed opium and notes of truth serum. Either way, Parvane was promoted. The tree was chopped down. You return to the present just as a servant refills your wine. This one is sweeter than before, tinged with something musky, possibly dates, possibly something more illicit. You sip cautiously. The Shah laughs at something the general says, then glances at you. "Our guest," he calls out. "Tell us, what do you think of Persian hospitality?" You smile. "It's layered." Laughter ripples across the pavilion. The vizier claps you on the back a little too hard. The general raises his glass. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale resumes singing, or warning. Now for your quirky footnote. In medieval Persia, garden parties were sometimes designed as psychological tests. Court psychologists, yes, they had those, would observe seating arrangements, eating patterns, even who reached for which fruit first. A preference for sour cherries, ambition, melons, sentimentality. Grapes before bread, narcissism. These results would be compiled into private dossiers that could make or break a courtier's future. One particularly vain noble, upon learning his fruit file, was unflattering, attempted to bribe the kitchen staff to switch his preferences. The result? A disastrous banquet where he insisted he loved boiled turnips and vomited into a rosebush. Back at the pavilion, music begins again. Slow, low, and almost apologetic. The Shah leans back, watching his court with the detachment of a man who knows someone here is lying and is just waiting for them to blink. The general is now quiet. The vizier is humming. A breeze passes through, scattering rose petals into a nearby fountain. You think about the melon, the slicing, the silence, and you wonder, was tonight the betrayal or just the invitation? Later, as you walk back toward your quarters, you realize something that sends a chill down your spine. You were never served melon, not one slice, not even a sliver. And that, in this context, might be the most deliberate decision of the night. Because being offered nothing is not neutrality, it's exclusion. It means someone, somewhere, wants you to remain hungry. Hungry for what, you're not sure. But you'll find out. You don't know where you are. Not exactly. The air smells like cardamom and old parchment, and the walls are lined with hanging lanterns that flicker like they're trying to remember something. Your robe is damp from the night's humidity, your breath a little too quick for comfort. You were summoned here, not invited. That's the first red flag. The second? The man waiting for you inside is sipping camel milk, slowly, like it's part of a ritual and you're already behind. He gestures for you to sit, not with a hand, but with a nod. Just enough movement to suggest control without effort. The room is lined with cushions and scrolls. A single low table between you holds dates, pistachios, and a pale ceramic cup filled with what looks like moonlight. You sit. He smiles. Camel milk, he says. Best chilled. Second best traded for secrets. You raise an eyebrow. Do you drink it or confess over it? He shrugs. Both. Depends on the company. You lift the cup. It's warm, sweet, thick in a way that coats the tongue and fogs the mind just a little. You take a second sip. The fog thickens. He introduces himself only as the archivist, which could mean anything from scholar to executioner in this part of the palace. His eyes are sharp, but not cruel. The kind of sharp that's designed to slice lies, not throats. You've eaten well, I hear. You've tasted things most men only dream of. You nod. And some things I didn't dream of, but still remember. He chuckles. Good. That means you're ready. He places a folded parchment on the table, sealed with wax. No emblem. Just a faint scent of saffron and disturbingly sweat. This, he says, was intercepted last night. It's not written in code because it is the code. A recipe, hidden in rhyme. Read it aloud, and you'll learn who plans to die or kill. You hesitate. He leans in. We use flavors the way other courts use swords. Every ingredient is a syllable. Every dish a warning. You open the letter. It begins innocently enough. Verses about almond cakes and honeyed walnuts, but halfway through the rhyme a strange tension builds. A line about bitter zest and salted plum. Another about dates consumed in silence. The final stanza reads, If she takes the second sip, let her speak. If the fig is cut too deep, she's weak. Let the stew stay warm, but never boil, or blood will stain the jasmine soil. You look up. The archivist is watching you carefully. You understand? He asks. Barely. He nods. That's enough. He stands and walks to a shelf lined with tiny ceramic jars, each labeled with a single letter. He selects one and places it in front of you. Open it when you leave. Inside is something small that will change what you taste tonight. You won't know when or why, but you'll know when it starts working. You ask what it is. Pillow talk, he says. You frown. You've been drinking too much milk. He leans closer. No, you just haven't been listening. And now, tonight's sex story. In 1133, during the rule of the Seljuk Sultan Masood, a spy posing as a merchant's concubine seduced her way into a council meeting by offering the most obscure dish in the palace, a fermented camel milk custard served only during lunar eclipses. The dessert was so rare, only one cook knew how to make it, and he'd disappeared years earlier. Somehow, she made it. She served it with candied fennel seeds and sat silently as generals discussed troop movements over their bowls. She listened, took notes. Later, her report reached Byzantium, and a fortress was sacked in record time. The custard became legend. Forbidden. The Sultan reportedly banned camel milk altogether for a year. Sales tripled. Back in the room, the archivist waves a hand and a servant enters. Young, genderless, eyes like dark water. They kneel beside you and place a cushion at your feet. This one, the archivist says, is your riddle. They speak only in riddles and pastries. If they offer you saffron, it means yes. Poppy seeds, no. Sesame? You're asking the wrong question. You blink. And what am I supposed to ask? He smiles. That's the point. The servant opens a small box filled with tiny pastries, each shaped like a different animal. You choose one shaped like a fish. They nod. Wise, the archivist says. The fish can't blink, but it always sees. The servant offers you a second one, this one shaped like a falcon. You hesitate, then shake your head. They blink once, slowly, then leave. The archivist watches the door close. You passed, he says, or failed. Hard to say. Either way, they won't kill you. tonight. He pours more camel milk. Now go. The hour is shifting. You'll know what to do when you taste it. You take the jar, still unopened, and step into the hallway that wasn't there before. Because in this palace, doorways appear like rumors, right when you least expect them. Quirky detail for the hour. In the city of Ray, there once existed a school of culinary spies trained not in weapons or languages, but in taste. These agents were trained to detect poison not by color or smell, but by the way it altered texture. A change in the softness of yogurt, the graininess of sugar, the viscosity of grape syrup. Their tongues were registered like royal seals, and their silence was enforced with cloves soaked in vinegar. If they betrayed a secret, they lost their tongues, literally. You return to your chambers and unwrap the ceramic jar. Inside, a single dried petal, deep red, almost black. You touch it to your tongue. Nothing at first. Then a pulse, slow and sweet, and a whisper, not in your ears, but behind your eyes. Trust the bitter, doubt the sweet. You lie back, unsure if you're dreaming or decoding, but either way, you know something's changed, and tonight's taste might be your last. The first thing you hear is laughter, wet, slow, and sinful. The kind of laughter that smells like trouble before you even see the lips it comes from. You push open a door you weren't meant to find, into a dim room painted in amber candlelight and secrets. And there they are, a priest and a prostitute, seated cross-legged on opposite ends of a low table, debating morality between spoonfuls of honeycomb. He's old, draped in beige linen, with a beard that belongs in a holy book. She's young, barefoot, wearing nothing but a silk sash and confidence. The honey glistens between them like a golden ceasefire. You step in, caught. Not just by their stare, but by the scent. Thick honey, ripe figs, and a trace of something medicinal. Rose water? No, something sharper. The priest doesn't flinch. The woman grins. "We were expecting you," she purrs. "Someone told us you've been eating your way through prophecy and poison. Thought you might need dessert." She pats the cushion beside her. You sit. Of course you do. This is not a brothel, and it's not a temple. It's something in between. A twilight zone where belief and desire negotiate terms, and everything served is double-edged. The priest pours you tea, no ceremony, just steam and silence. "What's more dangerous," he asks, "the hunger of the body or the hunger of the soul?" The woman interrupts. "Depends who's cooking." She plucks a fig from a bowl, tears it open with her fingers, revealing its glistening red center. "Some things you bite before you understand." You sip the tea. It tastes like ash and memory. They explain, though neither claims truth, that this is where people come when they don't know what they want. Lovers, spies, sinners, philosophers. Everyone sits at this table, eventually, to confess, to argue, to taste what they can't say out loud. The woman gestures toward a plate of sweets, sesame halva, sugared pistachios, and slices of quince soaked in spiced syrup. "Eat," she says, "and then answer something for me." You hesitate. "What?" She smiles. "Would you rather sin and survive, or pray and perish?" The priest frowns but doesn't disagree. "Careful," he warns. "The honey hears everything." And now, your sex story of the section. In 1071, during the waning years of the Buyid dynasty, there lived a courtesan named Zoreh, who claimed to have converted 3 high-ranking clerics using nothing but honey and metaphor. Her most infamous performance took place during a private feast arranged by a poet-turned-prince. Zoreh entered wrapped in nothing but silk scarves embroidered with verses from the Quran. Scandalous, yes, but beautifully done. She offered her audience honey on their fingers instead of their tongues. She whispered, "The sweetness you seek is not found in books." One cleric renounced his office and became her lover. Another reportedly fled to Egypt. The third composed a treatise defending sensual love as a path to the divine. That text was burned. Zoré vanished. But in the city of Yazd, there's still a pastry shop that sells honey-drenched bread called Zoré's Farewell. Some say it's an aphrodisiac. Others say it's a warning. Back at the table, the priest offers a counterpoint. Love without restraint, he says, is like honey and fire. Sweet for a moment, burned forever. The woman shrugs. Depends on the fire. They both turn to you. You've been tasting danger, she says. Now taste doubt. She hands you a spoonful of something dark and glossy. Black tahini with clove, she says. Eat it if you want clarity. You ask what happens if you refuse. Then you'll never understand the question. You eat. It's bitter, smoky, almost cruel on the tongue. But afterward, the room seems clearer. The priest sighs. We've all broken our vows, he murmurs. Even the gods. Your quirky tidbit of the evening? In a now lost district of Shiraz, there once existed an order of sweet oracles, women trained to use candy and confections as tools of divination. They would read the way syrup dripped, interpret air pockets in nougat, and taste sugar blindfolded to sense the future. One famously predicted a city-wide flood after noticing that every almond she used that week tasted slightly of metal. No one believed her. The flood came. Her shop was the only one left standing. Her statue, carved entirely from rock candy, still melts a little every summer. The priest begins to chant softly. Not in Arabic, not Persian. Something older. The woman joins, harmonizing with a voice that curls into your ribs. You close your eyes. You see a palace made of glass, a river of wine running uphill, a fruit so red it vibrates. Then nothing. When you open your eyes, the table is empty. The honey is gone. The fig is whole again. The air smells like dust and wood smoke. You're alone. Or not. Someone slips a note under the cushion. One word, wait. You don't know if it's an order or a blessing. But you do. You don't hear her approach. One moment the garden path ahead is empty, just dust, jasmine petals, and the hum of lazy cicadas. And then she's there, standing barefoot in silk trousers, so sheer they shimmer like heat rising from stone. Her hair is woven with violet threads, her eyes too tired to lie. She doesn't speak at first, just walks past you, deliberately slow, trailing a scent of figs, saffron, and something else, like warm skin after a bath. You follow, because what else can you do? She leads you toward a narrow corridor nestled between the herb gardens and the stables, through a door disguised as a tangle of grapevines. Inside, a low room lit only by oil lamps and the occasional gasp of wind slipping through the shutters. The floor is covered in cushions. The walls are hung with woven panels depicting lovers mid-embrace, but always from the back, as if love here is always a secret. She sits and gestures for you to do the same. You do. Of course you do. She pours tea, amber, smoky, touched with orange peel, and finally speaks. Do you know why silk trousers are dangerous? You shake your head. Friction, she says, as if that explains everything. Then, seeing your confusion, she leans in. They slide too easily, and they stick where they shouldn't. Once I ruined a love affair over static. She sips her tea. And once, I started a revolution over a seam. You're not sure if she's joking. You're not sure if you want her to be. Her name is Tamina. She's the daughter of a merchant, the mistress of a diplomat, and the rumored confidant of at least one high priest. She speaks 5 languages, wears her silks starched with rosewater, and claims to have written half the anonymous love poems attributed to palace poets. Men get the credit, she shrugs. I get the stories. Tonight, she wants to tell you one. But first, she wants to dance. She stands, barefoot, and begins to move. Not with rhythm exactly, but with memory. Her hips sway like they're arguing with gravity. Her arms slice the air like calligraphy. You don't know if she's performing or exercising. Either way, you're entranced. At one point, she pulls a fig from a basket, rolls it slowly across her collarbone, then bites it without breaking eye contact. You nearly forget your own name. And now, your required sex story. In 1106, a merchant's daughter named Nilufar was gifted a pair of embroidered silk trousers by a Turkish ambassador who fancied himself a poet. She wore them to a banquet, sat cross-legged beside a scribe, and, due to the peculiar texture of the fabric, accidentally caused a scandal that echoed across 2 provinces. The trousers made a faint whispering sound whenever she shifted, which the scribe misinterpreted as a coded invitation. He responded by writing her a love poem in saffron on the underside of her bread. She laughed, showed it to the ambassador, who, overcome with jealousy, challenged the scribe to a duel. Neither man survived. Nilufar remarried twice, then opened a perfumery. The trousers? Donated to a shrine. The shrine mysteriously burned down. The perfume still sells. Back in the room, Tamina is laughing. "You look scared," she says. "You should be. Silk is a curse disguised as luxury." She tosses a pair of trousers at you. Light, sheer, embroidered with gold threads so fine they disappear in moonlight. "Wear these next time you tell a lie," she says. "They'll let everyone know." You nod. File that under warnings disguised as gifts. She sits beside you now, close enough to share breath. "There's a spice," she murmurs, "that causes dreams so vivid. They blur the line between memory and prophecy." You ask what it is. "I won't say, but I put it in your tea." You stiffen. She smirks. "Don't worry. It doesn't kill, just reveals." Suddenly you feel warm. Not from the tea. From something older. A memory you haven't remembered yet. You close your eyes. You see a corridor of mirrors. A bed draped in fig leaves. A hand that touches yours then vanishes. You open your eyes. She's watching you. Serious now. "It's starting," she says. "Tell me what you see." You tell her about the mirrors, the bed, the vanishing. She nods. "That's not a dream. That's a message." You ask from whom. She doesn't answer. She just hands you a folded note. You open it. One sentence. Friction reveals what fingers won't. You're about to ask what it means when she kisses your cheek. Slow, deliberate, final. "Now leave," she says, "before you see more than you're allowed to remember." You stumble into the hallway, silk trousers clutched in one hand, heart doing unfamiliar gymnastics. Outside, the garden is bathed in that pre-dawn light that makes everything look half forgiven. You walk faster. You don't look back. Your quirky tidbit of the hour? In a lesser-known district of Nishapur, there existed a garment makers guild that specialized in clothing designed to communicate emotional states. Threads were infused with tiny doses of saffron, clove, even powdered date pit. When worn, the scent released based on the body's heat and mood. Anger made the clove rise. Lust brought out the saffron. Betrayal triggered bitter almond. Court officials often wore plain robes over them to hide their reactions, unsuccessfully. One judge had to recuse himself from trials because his trousers kept exhaling desire. You reach your room, toss the silk trousers on a chair, and collapse onto the cushions. But sleep doesn't come. The tea lingers, the dream remains, and the whisper won't fade. Friction, you mutter to yourself, is just memory in motion. You think you're alone. You're wrong. The scent hits you before the sound does. Burnt sugar, saffron, something metallic curling around the edge of sweetness like rust in a rose. The corridor outside your chamber feels colder than usual, despite the torches still glowing like half-hearted promises. You follow the smell, half awake, barefoot, and wrapped in a robe someone else must have folded because it doesn't quite fit your shoulders. The hallway narrows. The scent intensifies. And there it is, just ahead. An open door framed by velvet drapes, the kind used for events no one is supposed to remember. You step inside. It's a confectionery, or maybe the remains of one. The air is thick with sugar and silence. Trays of sweets sit untouched, each one gleaming under hanging lamps like edible jewels waiting for a verdict. But something's off. There's too much symmetry. The sweets are arranged too precisely. You know by now that in this palace, perfection always means danger. In the center stands a woman. Tall, unsmiling, arms crossed like she's used to judging things far more valuable than pastries. "You're late," she says, without looking at you. The curse is already cooling. You blink. "I thought I was here for dessert." She snorts. "No, you're here for consequence." She introduces herself only as Persia, the palace's master confectioner and, by rumor, its most efficient punisher. "We don't use blades," she says, slicing a candy in half with a thin silver thread. "We use sweets." She lifts a piece of saffron brittle. "This one," she says, "makes a man fall in love with the first voice he hears. Unfortunately, that voice was mine." She eats it. "He still writes me letters. I file them under warnings." You ask if she's joking. "I'm always joking," she says, "especially when I mean it." She gestures to a tray of small golden orbs, each coated in crushed rose petals. "One of these is cursed," she says. "The others are merely confusing." You hesitate. "What kind of curse?" "The kind that makes you remember things you promised to forget." You pick one. She watches closely. You place it on your tongue. It melts fast, like guilt disguised as pleasure. A wave of warmth rolls through you, followed by the memory of a night you don't remember living. Cushions, laughter, someone's mouth saying your name in a language you didn't speak yet. You stagger. She catches your arm, steady. "There it is," she murmurs. "Your price." And now, your sex story. In 1099, a noblewoman named Mahin was accused of casting love spells using candied citrus and clove. Her most famous target? A married judge known for condemning anyone who dared romanticize food. After tasting her spiced orange syrup, he not only overturned a verdict he'd written hours before, but also declared Mahin's confections divine. They became lovers, then enemies, then lovers again. When he died, some say of heartbreak, others from an overindulgence in candied bergamot, his final letter reportedly read, "Your sweets lied better than your mouth." Mahin opened a tea house. Still open. Still dangerous. Persia slides another tray forward. These are darker, chocolates laced with dusted gold and tiny pomegranate seeds. "These," she says, "are reserved for enemies. Beautiful enough to trust, poisoned enough to teach." You ask how many have been served. She shrugs. "More than deserved it. Fewer than needed it." You notice something etched into the marble countertop. A single line of Persian script. "Every sweetness must be earned." She catches you reading. "House motto," she says. Also a warning. You ask what happens if someone refuses a sweet. She smiles. Then they never know who they really are. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the palace of Sultan Sanjar, it was once fashionable to send apologies via pastries. Each type signified a different emotion. Sesame brittle for regret, pistachio nougat for remorse, and rose jellies for forgiveness. The problem? The meanings changed depending on who sent them. One ambassador accidentally reignited a feud after sending what he thought was a peace offering, but was interpreted as an insult involving camels and impotence. A brief war followed. The jellies were outlawed. Briefly. Persia begins crafting a sweet before your eyes. Sugar boiled into glass, wrapped around a fig stuffed with anise and fennel. "This one," she says, is called a memory trap. You eat it, and for 3 minutes you remember your first betrayal in perfect detail. She hands it to you. You hesitate. "I already remember," you say. She nods. "Then you don't need it. That's rarer than you think." You sit together in silence. The room hums with the low burn of too many feelings wrapped in too much sugar. Finally, she speaks. "You're not just passing through this palace," she says. "You're being steeped, like tea, like poison. Every person you meet adds a note. Eventually, you'll be something someone else has to swallow." You leave the room with a small box of sweets she insists you take. "One of them will matter," she says, "but not to you." You ask who. She doesn't answer. Outside, the moon is high and cruel. The path to your chamber feels longer, narrower. The box in your hand is warm. You don't open it. Not yet. Because sometimes the most dangerous bite is the one you haven't taken. You never make it back to your room. The path turns where it shouldn't. The torches flicker too low, and suddenly you're in a hallway that smells like sweat, jasmine, and something fried. At the end, laughter, loud and guttural, the kind of sound that always follows a joke someone might die for. You round the corner and stop cold. You've stumbled into a brothel, or a kitchen, or both. It's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. This is not the polished pleasure house of poets and princes. This is the underground one. Hidden beneath the palace's west wing, lit with lanterns made from old wine jugs, pulsing with music that sounds like drums played on bones. The scent of garlic clings to velvet curtains. Meat sizzles over a fire that clearly isn't supervised by anyone sober. And behind the flame, shouting instructions while grinding saffron with the base of a dagger, stands the chef. Not just any chef. They call her Shireen, but that's not her name. Her real name, no one dares speak. She's not a cook. She's a storm in an apron. Tattooed wrists, eyes like hot coals, and a temper that has allegedly caused 2 minor uprisings and 1 extremely justified stabbing. She sees you, spits into a pan for luck, and waves you in with a chicken leg. You hungry or just nosy? You mutter something about both. She grins. Good, we like our spies with an appetite. This is the brothel's kitchen, a greasy, glorious chaos of forbidden feasts and whispered confessions. Every dish is made with double meaning. The roasted lamb isn't just food. It's an offering, a trap, a confession. The bread is braided with secrets. The stews? Infused with seduction. Each spice tells a story. Each knife has a name. Shireen tosses you a stool, smears pomegranate paste across a slab of grilled eggplant, and says, "Sit down. Tonight we cook revenge." And tonight's sex story? Oh, it's cooked right into the legend of this place. Back in 1101, a concubine-turned-cook named Razieh fell in love with the Shah's brother, an ambitious man with weak morals and a stronger appetite. He promised her escape. She believed him. He left with another. She didn't weep. She sharpened knives. A week later, during a feast celebrating a new political alliance, Razieh served a dish of marinated liver so tender it made grown men hum. Everyone praised her, until the Shah realized whose liver it was. His brother's, braised in mint and shame. No one arrested her. They promoted her. She died rich, surrounded by kitchen boys who called her Lady Carver. Her recipes still circulate under false names. Back in the present, Shireen is pulling skewers from the fire, swearing at a man who dropped the saffron again. She explains without being asked. Every brothel has 2 doors, one for pleasure, one for justice. Ours is the kitchen. You ask what she means. She hands you a kebab and points to a man laughing too hard at the corner table. He sold 3 girls last week to a merchant from Basra. Tonight, he'll eat a dish that makes him speak the truth in his sleep. Tomorrow, let's see if his merchant friend still wants him. You chew your kebab. It tastes like justice dipped in sumac. Here's your quirky tidbit. In certain pleasure houses of Qom and Yazd, the chefs were given more autonomy than the madams. Why? Because food dictated mood. Want guests to linger? Serve heavy lentils. Want them passionate? Spicy lamb and wine-soaked cherries. Want them gone by midnight? Offer melon, digestive but cold-hearted. Some chefs even controlled access to the courtesans, deciding who deserved dessert and who should be left with nothing but flatbread. One chef allegedly ran a side operation out of her oven. Clients who left unsatisfied found their names spelled in ash on the doorstep by morning. Shireen slides a tray of sweets your way. These are not for eating, she warns. Each one's a memory. One for lust, one for guilt, one for rage. If you eat the wrong one, you'll cry about things you never did. You pick one shaped like a crescent moon. She watches. You bite. It's bitter, then sweet, then gone. You remember the garden, the fig, the way someone looked at you like you were already a regret. She nods. Good choice. That one's for clarity. Now tell me, who sent you? You blink. I wasn't sent? She laughs. Everyone is sent, even if they don't know it. She hands you a napkin, embroidered with a name you recognize. The poet, the Sufi, the one who warned you. He's been here too, she says. He left me a recipe and a warning. Not all truths are meant to be served hot. You ask if she believes him. I believe his food. His tongue depends on the wine. And then, silence. The brothel's music fades. The fire crackles. Someone begins to cry in a nearby room, quiet, controlled, like they've practiced it. You rise to leave. Shireen tosses you a spice pouch. Use this next time someone lies to you. Sprinkle it on their words. If they choke, they're guilty. If they moan, they're in love. You ask what happens if they do both. She grins. Marry them. Or run. You walk back through the smoky corridor, past silk curtains still trembling from footsteps you didn't hear. You clutch the pouch tight. Outside, the night feels thicker. The moon hangs lower. The palace walls press closer. And in your hand is a bag of seasoning that might be the key to truth, or the trigger to your undoing. You wake up to cumin and chains, not the rattling kind that echo through prison halls. These are quieter, woven into trade routes, packed in camel saddlebags alongside crushed coriander, ambergris, and unwilling passengers. The air is dry and dusty, the way only desert markets can be at dawn. But something's wrong. The spices are too fresh, the silence too forced. You're standing at the edge of the oldest part of the city, near the caravanserai where spice merchants unload their riches, and where human cargo once changed hands with just as much ceremony. You're not here for saffron. You're here for a story no one tells while standing up straight. Ahead of you is a makeshift bazaar, half spice stall, half memory trap. You smell everything before you see it. Cinnamon crushed into coins, dried rose petals stacked like forgotten prayers, turmeric dust still clinging to fingers that never wanted to trade. It's overwhelming, beautiful, horrifying. You walk past jars filled with black cumin and fenugreek, saffron filaments priced higher than livestock, and bundles of dried limes dark as bruises. A man hands you a cardamom pod and says, "Smell this. That's what longing used to taste like." You do. It hits you like grief dipped in perfume. Beside him, a young woman is tying up sachets of spice to hang on a low rack. But what she's really doing is telling stories. Each blend is labeled not by name, but by feeling. Regret, desire, exile, and one simply called her silence. You pick it up. It smells like roasted clove and broken promises. She watches you. That one travels, she says. It's been through 4 lovers and 1 rebellion. You ask what happens if you cook with it. Depends on who's hungry. And here comes the hook. In medieval Persia, the spice roots were also flesh roots. While traders passed through the empire with satchels of cinnamon and silk, they also trafficked in people, servants, slaves, concubines, dancers, and worse. And historians still argue which commodity shaped history more. Was it the cinnamon that seduced sultans, or the woman forced to grind it who whispered secrets into someone else's pillow? There's a story from 1144, barely whispered, never written, about a girl named Yasemin sold at a caravan stop outside Nishapur. She was only 15, gifted with a voice that could stop a war or start one. A spice merchant purchased her along with a sack of sumac. He didn't know she was literate. He didn't know she could count. He didn't know she had memorized every map her uncle ever sold to travelers. By the time she was 16, she was rerouting shipments to favor rebels over royals. By 17, she was teaching other girls how to poison pomegranates. She vanished by 18. Some say she married a prince. Others claim she's buried beneath a cinnamon tree in Qom. Either way, the routes changed after her. Quietly. Permanently. Back in the bazaar, a scholar in dusty robes is arguing with a merchant about the symbolism of coriander. It's not just for digestion, he insists. It was used in love spells for centuries. Mixed with date syrup and smeared on letters, it turns forgetfulness into desire. The merchant shrugs. I sell it by the gram, not by the heartbreak. You walk on. Tonight's sex story is sticky with irony. In 1109, a famed spice master named Afsane, known across 3 cities for her ability to identify any powder blindfolded, was said to have fallen in love with a Roman general who came seeking her knowledge of mace and nutmeg. They spoke in scent. He gifted her cloves in the shape of a heart. She taught him how to brew lust from tamarind and toasted cumin. For 6 months, they lived in secret, their affair hidden beneath the scent of their own making. When he returned to Rome, he took a satchel of her spices and a letter sealed with a kiss of powdered anise. He was assassinated before reading it. The satchel was opened years later and found to contain not just spices, but a single line etched into the lid. You only love the smell of me. You pause at a stall where old maps are spread over cracked wood. They're not geographic, they're aromatic. Roots drawn in scent, tracking the migration of flavor across empires. One line moves from Zanzibar to Shiraz, annotated in clove. Another stretches from Damascus to Delhi, marked in cardamom. And each city along the path has a second mark, small circles inked in red, almost invisible. You ask what they are. The vendor leans in. Everywhere someone disappeared. Here's your quirky detail. In some circles, especially among elite kitchens and traveling poets, a tradition developed called scenting the verse. Poets would steep parchment in spiced waters before writing on it. Nutmeg for desire, myrrh for mourning, cinnamon for courage. Lovers would inhale the scent before reading. One poet claimed his verses were more powerful when read aloud after being warmed over clove smoke. A single scroll from this tradition survives, kept in a private library in Yazd. It smells like nothing now, just ink and paper. But legend says if you heat it with the right spice beneath it, the words reappear, and so do the memories. You leave the bazaar just as the sun begins to rise, turning every spice jar into stained glass. The sachet labeled "Her Silence" is still in your hand. You squeeze it. Something sharp pokes through the cloth. A pin? A thorn? You look. It's a sliver of bone, human, clean, polished. On it, a single etched letter, faint but unmistakable. Someone's initials, or maybe a warning. You walk faster. Because the thing about spice is that it lingers, long after the feast, long after the story, long after the blood. You didn't mean to follow the music, but there it was, curling through the corridors like mist from another century, soft and low, played on a reed flute that sounded like it had been dipped in grief. It pulls at you, not like a hand, but like a memory. You trace it down through the winding stone halls, past shadowed rooms that whisper your name differently each time, until you emerge into a courtyard that shouldn't exist. It's moonlit and still, surrounded by marble arches and cypress trees that lean in as though they're listening too. A long table sits in the center, set not with platters of food, but with bowls of rose petals, dried pomegranate, and scattered pearls. And seated around it, silently, are people who shouldn't be breathing. You've stumbled into a ghost feast. No one looks at you, not directly, but they all seem to know you're here. The woman in the corner with hair the color of old honey dips her fingers into a bowl of saffron and begins to paint symbols on the table. A man with half his face covered in ash raises a goblet that drips not wine but ink. A child, barefoot and wearing a crown made of dried herbs, smiles at you. And that's the most terrifying part. You sit, because what else can you do? This is not a feast for the living. It's a remembrance dinner, an ancient rite once whispered about in forbidden corners of Persian mysticism, now thought extinct. But clearly someone kept the ritual alive. You recognize the setup now. Each item on the table corresponds to a lost love, a betrayal, a regret. The rose petals represent unspoken goodbyes. The pearls, promises never kept. The pomegranate? That's for revenge not yet fulfilled. And here you are, a living guest among dead appetites. And here's the twisted hook. In medieval Persia, there were households, aristocratic and otherwise, that hosted elaborate feasts, not to honor the dead, but to invite them. Plates were set, wine poured, poems recited, not for mourning, but for confrontation. It was believed that unresolved ghosts, especially those of lovers, traitors, or poisoned guests, could be summoned with the right combination of scent, sound, and shame. And you, tonight, have just sat down at one. The woman with the honey-colored hair speaks. Her voice is dry as crushed almond. "You've tasted everything," she says. "But have you tasted memory?" She slides a bowl toward you. Inside, slices of dried quince and candied dates, dusted with ash and rose powder. You take a piece. It's bitter, then cloyingly sweet. Then it tastes like dirt. Your hands begin to tremble. "Good," she says. "Now you can hear us." The stories begin. One by one, the guests speak, not with words, but with food. A man bites into a salted plum, and suddenly you know he drowned in a bathhouse, betrayed by someone he loved. The child cracks a walnut, and your mouth fills with the taste of abandonment. The woman places a spoonful of yogurt mixed with dried mint onto her tongue, and you feel what it's like to be forgotten in a locked room while someone else takes your name. This is not metaphor. This is memory, served raw. Tonight's sex story is no less spectral. In the year 1083, during the festival of Merigen, a young bride named Farzaneh vanished after her wedding night. Her husband claimed she ran off. Her family claimed otherwise. Years later, in a village far from Shiraz, a traveling apothecary reportedly served a guest who wept uncontrollably after biting into a quince tart. The guest claimed the tart tasted exactly like Farzaneh's perfume. When pressed, he admitted the recipe had been whispered to him by a woman who visited him in dreams. Her final words before fading were, "Tell him I never ran." Back in the courtyard, the air shifts. The flute plays lower now, slower. You're handed a goblet filled with something dark and glittering. You drink. It tastes like mulberries and bone. The man with the ash-covered face leans in close and whispers, "We're not here because we died. We're here because you forgot." Your vision blurs. The guests begin to rise, one by one, walking into the shadows of the trees. No farewells, just absence. You look down. Your hands are stained with something sticky. Pomegranate, blood, both. A final plate is left before you, nothing on it but a single seed. Here's your quirky detail of the night. In the city of Isfahan, there was once a law that allowed a grieving family to serve one ghost dish at the next public feast. This dish was never to be touched, never named, and always placed at the host's left. No one asked about it. No one looked too long. But the rumor was, if the dish disappeared during the night, someone at the table would die within the month, unless they confessed whatever they'd buried. One year, every house served soup. None of it survived. 4 confessions followed. 1 exile. 2 weddings. 1 ghost never came back. You stumble out of the courtyard just before dawn. Your clothes are damp. Your breath fogs in the warming air. The door you entered through is gone. No sound. No scent. Nothing left but that pomegranate seed in your palm. You clutch it tight. Because some feasts are for the living. And some are for what the living refuse to swallow. There's something undeniably suspicious about a picnic with a view, especially when the view is the back courtyard of a courthouse, and the picnic basket arrives not with a smile, but a sealed scroll stamped with the emblem of the city's legal chamber. You've been summoned, apparently, for an informal arbitration over leftovers. You'd laugh if the message didn't include a warning. Your taste may determine the verdict. You follow the servant through side alleys lined with stone, cool, quiet, the kind of path you only use if you're trying to avoid being seen. The air is thick with sun-warmed dates, dried mint, and that low, persistent scent of fresh parchment. Someone nearby is copying a legal manuscript, and somewhere deeper in the walls, you hear a rooster who doesn't know it's already afternoon. The courtyard is shaded by fig trees and echoing with bureaucratic tension. There's a low wooden table already set for 3, but only 1 person is seated. A woman, hair tucked into a linen scarf, robes ink-stained, fingers stained darker. A legal scribe. She doesn't smile, doesn't stand, just gestures to the place beside her. "We're waiting on the judge," she says, "but he's always late for edible hearings." You sit. The table is curious, laid with food that looks half-eaten, a bowl of lentils scraped thin, bread torn unevenly, a plate of pickled vegetables arranged too carefully to be accidental. You ask what kind of trial this is. She replies without blinking. Stolen lunch, possibly seduction, possibly treason. Turns out, in certain Persian courts, food wasn't just nourishment, it was evidence. If someone's meal was tampered with, shared without permission, or repurposed in flirtation, it could trigger a full investigation, especially if that meal came from the palace kitchen, and especially if the leftovers were found in someone else's chamber the next morning. The scribe hands you a small spoon. "We need a taster," she says. "You've eaten everywhere. You'll know if the honey has been tampered with." You taste. It's clean, but sharp, like someone added lemon zest not for flavor, but for emphasis. And here comes the twist. The judge arrives not in robes, but in traveling clothes, dust on his boots, ink behind his ears. "Apologies," he says. "Had to deal with a melon dispute in the North Quarter." He sits, looks at you. "You're the mouthpiece?" You nod. He sighs. "Very well. We'll proceed." The case is read aloud, half in Persian, half in coded culinary dialect. On the 14th night of Shaban, a dish of saffron rice with lamb and barberry was served to Lady Marjan, as per her request. Said dish was later found partially consumed in the chamber of one Saadi ibn Rahim, an unmarried calligrapher. Alongside the plate was a handwritten note. "Your seasoning lingers longer than your glances." The courtroom, not that this courtyard is officially one, falls silent. You try not to smile. The scribe coughs. The judge raises an eyebrow. "Your opinion, taster." You clear your throat. There's no evidence of poison, but the cardamom is heavy. The judge nods. "Cardamom implies intention, not indulgence." The scribe adds, "But the presence of dried orange peel means it may have been a return gift, not a seduction." The judge leans back. "Let the bread speak, then. And here's your quirky detail. In Persian law during the Seljuk period, bread was considered a truth medium in minor court disputes. If 2 parties ate from the same loaf and experienced no discomfort, The claim was considered neutral. If one coughed, blushed, or sweated, it was viewed as guilt, or at least partial deceit. In more extreme cases, honey was spread between the loaves, and both parties had to repeat their testimony with a sweetened tongue. If either stumbled over their words, the accusation stood. The judge breaks the bread, offers half to the scribe, half to you. Not standard procedure, he says, but tonight, nothing is. You eat, it's good, chewy, honest. The scribe chews slowly, then says, I don't think this was treason. The judge sighs. Then seduction? You nod. Intentional, but mutual. And now, your sex story. In 1112, a court translator named Tavus was accused of smuggling verses of love poetry through bakery deliveries. His alleged lover? The daughter of a court official, who claimed the poems were hidden in the folds of lavash bread, written in cinnamon. During the investigation, it was revealed that her kitchen assistant had been baking coated sweetbread for months, each one glazed with phrases like, your absence burns more than saffron, or my heart ferments in your shadow. The court found no evidence of actual contact, only crumbs and longing. Tavus was released. The bread girl was hired by the court to monitor poetic activity in pastries. She eventually married the judge. They published a cookbook. It was banned. Back at your courtyard hearing, the judge rises. This was never about food, he mutters. It never is. He declares the case closed. The lunch? Returned to the kitchen. The note? Archived. You? Dismissed with a strange look, half amusement, half relief. You're the only person I trust to taste truth, he says. That's either a blessing or a sentence. You walk away from the courtyard slower than you arrived. The bread still sits in your mouth like a story that refused to rot. You think about how easily food becomes law in this place. How a spoonful can indict. How a kiss left on a napkin can call a judge. You glance at your hands. Still clean. For now. Because in medieval Persia, nothing stayed just food for long. You thought you'd seen the last feast. You thought perhaps foolishly that you'd tasted everything Persia had to offer. The lust, the legend, the pomegranate-laced betrayals, the honey-thick prophecies. But no, there's one more room, one more table, and one more invitation. This time carved into the underside of your door in dried fig paste. No ink, no words, just the symbol of a lion with a fork in its mouth. The seal of the Majlis-i-Mazid, the feast of final guests. You weren't supposed to know about it. Most people don't until it's too late. The note attached simply says, midnight. Don't bring hunger. Bring memory. So you go. You pass through the garden without breathing, through doors that open on their own, through chambers where dancers sleep like statues. The palace has grown quiet in that uneasy way, as if the walls know something you don't. And then you arrive. A round chamber carved directly into the stone, lit only by oil floating in bowls of almond milk. In the center, a circular table, set for 7. One seat is empty. Yours. No one speaks. But the other guests look familiar. Not because you've met them before, but because they look like consequences. There's a poet whose verses you quoted without permission. A woman whose melon you didn't eat. A boy who offered you a fig and never spoke again. A cook with one eye and a ring that used to be yours. Each of them has a plate. So do you. The first course arrives without warning. Just steam and tension. A stew of lentils, garlic, and vinegar served with a spoon made of bone. It smells like someone else's heartbreak. You take a bite. It tastes like the first time you lied. Across the table, the cook nods. Here's the truth. No one writes into cookbooks. In medieval Persia, the final feasts were not about nourishment. They were about closure, or the lack of it. These were meals of reckoning, staged rarely, and only when a person's deeds could no longer be measured in words. It was believed that certain flavors could unlock memory in the body. Not metaphorical memory, actual sensation. That cinnamon could conjure guilt. That barberries, dried and soaked in rose water, could trigger shame. That eating your own dish, prepared not by your hands, but by the choices you made, was the only true confession. Your second course is simpler. Roasted eggplant, split down the middle, filled with dates, walnuts, and regret. It's the same recipe you tasted in Section 3, but now it doesn't taste like foreplay. It tastes like consequences. You chew slowly. The poet watches you. That night, he murmurs, you recited my words. You didn't credit me, but the audience clapped. You felt adored. You nod. You swallow. There's ash in your throat. Tonight's sex story comes too close. It's not legend. It's yours. The night with the honeyed lamb, the candlelight. The poem whispered into someone's ear. A line you thought was yours but wasn't. That person? They're here now across the table. Their plate is untouched. Their eyes are full. You can't look away. You shouldn't. The third course is bitter melon, wrapped in vine leaves, soaked in sour cherry juice. A dish only served in mourning, or punishment. You don't ask what you're mourning, you already know. Your quirky detail? In some Persian cities, there was a superstition that the last bite you ate in someone else's house sealed your fate with them. If it was sweet, you owed them a favor. If it was sour, they owed you pain. It became custom in some homes to manipulate the final flavor, to control the memory. Some hosts even placed sweets under the tongue of guests while they slept, ensuring loyalty. One ambitious host became infamous for rubbing vinegar into the crusts of his departing rival's bread. 3 years later, all three were found exiled, divorced, or worse. He, notably, opened a restaurant. The fourth course arrives and it's yours, literally. The pastry you refused in Section 15, shaped like a crescent, filled with poppy seeds and pomegranate. It's cold now, and it's yours to finish. You do. Slowly. It tastes like something you didn't get to say. Then the lights dim. The final act begins. The servers, hooded, barefoot, silent, bring in a tray. Covered. Heavy. Set it down. The woman whose melon you didn't eat stands. She removes the cover. Inside, a mirror, set in a tray of saffron. Your reflection is warped, not by the glass, but by the steam rising from what lies beneath. Because beneath that mirror is your last bite. You don't know what it is yet. You only know this. The room is watching. The story is closing. And you have to finish it. You lift the mirror. Beneath, rice. Fragrant, layered, three-colored. Saffron, barberry, turmeric. And in the center, a single apricot. Dried, whole, familiar. It's from the first day. Section 1, remember? You bite. And everything you've tasted rushes back at once. The hammam steam, the fig dance, the honey and mint, the poems carved in sugar, the dead guests, the judge's bread, the spice sachet, the note etched in fig paste, the silk trousers, the duck in pomegranate, the kiss you didn't return, the memory you weren't ready to keep. You look up, no one is there. You are alone. Because that's what the final feast always is. A reflection. A reckoning. A recipe you wrote without knowing. You close your eyes and finally you're full. End of script. Sweet dreams.